Doris Faulkner. Here today, Sandra Smith, co-host of Kennedy on Fox Business, Kennedy herself. Also from FBN, co-host of After the Bell, Melissa Francis. And today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, co-host of Five and host of Greg Gutfeld Show, the Greg Gutfeld Guy. He's here. He's outnumbered.
I'm here.
Yeah,
I'm here.
all good.
Not a hologram.
Well,
oh, you're not?
No.
Oh, my gosh, I thought you were like Tupac from
Yeah, I'm very
Coachella.
busy. I often send my hologram to do things that I'm too busy to do, but I just had to show up.
Like fire your minions?
Yes.
I'm glad that you're actually here, then.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome
Good
back.
to have you, Greg. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been a few days off. We're ready to roll.
Enjoying New Jersey.
Yes, a staycation. All right, we'll move on. Donald Trump is scheduled to speak in just a little while in the battleground state of Ohio. A campaign spokesperson says he'll detail his 3 pillars of fighting terrorism, which are forming new alliances with nations willing to fight ISIS, moving away from nation building, and tightening immigration from countries with a heavy terror footprint. Trump's foreign policy advisor, Walid Phares, spoke earlier about what we can expect from the speech, saying the speech will counter what he says President Obama and Hillary Clinton have been avoiding when it comes to talking about ISIS and taking them out.
What the speech of this afternoon is going to do is to elevate basically the level of this debate to a strategic level. That would force the other side, Secretary Clinton, to answer questions about the Iran deal. It will be explained about ISIS, about how to counter ISIS. What kind of coalitions do we need? How do we fight the homegrown jihadists here? So all these questions have been avoided. This speech would put it back on track.
All right, so in less than 2 hours, we're going to get something that Donald Trump hadn't given out yet.
Yes.
His details for fighting ISIS, because he said he didn't necessarily, if I'm remembering correctly, early on, want to give away things to the enemy the way that he said President Obama has by saying, I'm taking certain things off the table like boots on the ground. Your thoughts?
Me? Sounds pretty promising. It's like checking the ID at a bar. He's doing a background check of people coming into the United States, and people are going to say, my God, this is an ideological litmus test. But actually, it's not such a bad idea to look at social networks that people are on, to see the kind of beliefs that they have. This seems like common sense to me. The other thing is that he's declaring an ideological war against radical Islam. And this is important because it is parallel to the Cold War, at least in my view as a young person growing up in the Cold War. You had to identify the enemy. But there's one caveat here, and it's an issue that I've been struggling with. I call it idea contamination. I believe in all of these things. I believe strongly in these. I share these visions with Donald Trump. But the way that he expresses them casually has contaminated a lot of these views, so that when you come out and you say how strongly you are about how to defeat radical Islam and Islamism in general, they lump you into this kind of like xenophobia. Because that's what's happening now. They're trying to label Trump as xenophobic. And so anytime you share a belief with him, you are also tainted with the same brush, and it hurts. In my view, it hurts the war on terror. It hurts the issues of law and justice.
And I often take notes on what you say.
Thank you.
So I wrote that idea contamination down. So what is Donald Trump expected to do about that? I mean, is he expected just not to have the conversation? Because there are some things that, there are some things that we're talking about now that if it were not for him, they wouldn't be part of his campaign. You don't think that we'd be talking this much about illegal immigration if it weren't for Donald Trump?
I think illegal immigration and terror and race and law and order has been the staple of Fox News for 10 years. Well, all he did was watch Fox News.
In the campaigns themselves. I mean, until recently, had you heard President Obama say that fighting ISIS is his #1 priority?
So people are talking about it more because he boils it down to phrases that create novelty in the media.
But here's the problem with that. He creates these big phrases like he's going to ban Muslims.
Right.
And his spokesperson, Hope Hicks, said, we are going to ban Muslims. When he says all Muslims, he means all Muslims. But now he has narrowed it down so much to say that he's going to bolster the questionnaire from countries that have difficulty with terrorism. I mean, that's vastly different. And I wonder how different the conversation would have been if he would have started that and ended somewhere else. Because when you start somewhere that big, it's almost impossible to get people to complexify what you have made so simple.
Or you beat 16 others in a primary.
Yeah, I mean, he moved to what was the logical place on that, where he goes, well, I don't mean a religion, I don't mean Muslim, I mean terror. territories where radical Islam has spread. We need to temporarily, at least, stop letting people come in from this country until we can verify. And I am, for one, you know, every time they say we are able to go back and vet and verify everybody who's coming from this country, I have a really hard time believing that myself, because I've been to the post office, I've been to the DMV, the government doesn't do things well. I don't know how they could possibly do this, but he has to be more disciplined, like Greg said, that his sloppy language is getting in the way of it.
And I'm hoping that the vetting is going to be run better than
I don't know.
things
I
that are
count
really
on it.
only for us for our car licensing, like the DMV. But you've made the point before of how broad the vetting system is and how the time period to get it done is shrinking.
Well, yeah, and it keeps shrinking. But just using the words radical Islam is expected to be a big pillar of this speech today, because remember, his opponents, while he was in the primary, wouldn't use it, many of them. Hillary Clinton still won't use it. So he's expected to, as his campaign put out, propose establishing federal benchmarks to explain warning signs of radicalization. And in his words, to do this, you have to use those words and identify the enemy.
I have a quick question about that, because last week Donald Trump said that President Obama is the founder of ISIS and Hillary Clinton is the co-founder. And then he said he wasn't being sarcastic. Then he said he was kind of being sarcastic. But then he ended with, no, I wasn't being sarcastic. They are the founder and co-founder of ISIS. If that's the case, and he wants to defeat ISIS and mortally wound them, what does that say about what he wants to do to the president?
Oh, well.
Greg, would you like to take that?
Well, again,
if you're tying it all up, how do you then separate it?
Yeah, and so what happens is, like, he defeated, what, 17 people in the primary, and it was entertaining because the media saw that he was going against Republicans. So it was okay. As long as he was coming at him. So he's coming at him. And now, and there are people here on this very couch and the other couch later at 5 o'clock who are saying, wait till it becomes him versus Hillary. We have a table. when it becomes...
Isn't this better, by the way?
Yeah, yes, it's really good for my back. But it's now you have this competition between Hillary and Trump, and the media now isn't forgiving Trump for his outbursts that he did during the primary, because during the primary it was just against other Republicans, and we know the media is Democrat. It's 80% to 90% according to polls. So now they've got him, and they're just going to go after him with each thing. Having said that, again, I have to give Donald Trump big credit for this. He jumped off a cliff. There were so many people that wouldn't run for president, people that fantasize about it, people, again, in this building who have shows, who think about running, but never do. And he actually did
Greg, I'm sitting right here.
Yeah, but I mean...
But it's like that old adage of, you know, don't try to talk the person out of doing the thing that you can only talk about that they're actually doing.
Yes, exactly. I followed that.
Right?
Yes.
So Hillary Clinton at one point did say radical Islam, and I know Sandra was pointing this out. She walked it back. And so my question was, did she mean something different by it?
Well, she went back to radical jihad or whatever, which is like frozen ice. I mean, she went back to one of those phrases that's like just saying the same thing twice. She kind of said it, and then she backed away. I mean, the problem is, if you remember correctly, when she did say it, President Obama came out the very next day. And, you know, basically gave her a tongue lashing for having said that. So that's kind of how she went back on it again. I mean, I don't know.
You know what it's like? It's like when your boyfriend won't say, I love you. You know, and it's like all you want, you just want him to say, I love you. You complain to all your friends, like, please, and he says it one time, and then that's it. He never says it again.
And it's like, to your parallel of radical Islam, he says, I really care about you.
Yes, exactly.
He won't say radical Islam, he won't say love.
I care about you.
Yeah.
I hold your hand.
And you know, you just, and I can almost hear the words coming out of Sandra's mouth, you just also hope that while he goes down this road, he talks a little bit about how we'll pay for some of these things in the economy.
But he's always been really good about that. But I think the problem and the thing that concerns his supporters when he has a day like this, where he's supposed to give this pivotal speech, that he could be completely eloquent and it could be a wonderful speech, that 5 minutes later or 1 day later he says something that completely makes you forget that and wipes that off the headlines.
Everyone is so excited to see what that thing is, because it's gotten to the point in his campaign where he's just going for broke, and Lord only knows what he's going to say next, and that's why everyone is tuning in.
We will certainly be watching and carrying that speech, and it's set to be for 2 p.m. Eastern, so you can watch it right here on Fox News Channel today. Donald Trump, his foreign policy, those 3 pillars against the Islamic State savages. Also, another programming note, be sure to tune in to Hannity tomorrow night. Sean will host an exclusive town hall with Donald Trump. That's Tuesday night. for those of you who don't know, today's Monday. With a focus on Mr. Trump's plan to defeat ISIS and radical Islamic terrorism. That's 10 p.m. Eastern right here on the FNC. And as Donald Trump gets set to speak, the warning from the Wall Street Journal that he's running out of time to do any kind of a reset, as the candidate himself says, quote, "I am who I am." Does he need a reset? Is that what voters want? And what we're learning about the suspect whose death sparked riots.
Donald Trump pushing back against calls to change his temperament. It comes as a Wall Street Journal editorial is warning he's running out of time for a turnaround. The Journal saying, quote, "If they can't get Mr. Trump to change his act by Labor Day, the GOP will have no choice but to write off the nominee as hopeless and focus on salvaging the Senate and House and other down-ballot races. As for Mr. Trump, he needs to stop blaming everyone else and decide if he wants to behave like someone who wants to be president or turn the nomination over to Mike Pence." But one of Trump's top supporters, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, says he prefers someone who's honest and unscripted over a polished politician.
He may make more insensitive statements at times because he's not a polished politician. And their only issue against Donald Trump is he doesn't say things in the right way. Well, he happens to do things in the right way, and he happens to stand for the right things. And if he says a few insensitive things, you know the beauty of that? He's not talking to you in a scripted way. He's talking to you straight off the cuff, and sometimes he can get misunderstood. But I prefer that to a crook.
As always, Donald Trump responding on Twitter, well, with this: "I have always been the same person, remain true to self. The media wants me to change, but it would be very dishonest to supporters to do so." All right, Greg, I'll go to you first.
Well, I think they're talking past each other. We're talking about, why don't you reach out to the people you haven't convinced yet rather than feeding the base? Like, you can continue and go like a stand-up comedian across the country and say the things that makes people laugh, or you could try to articulate your views in a way that other people go, "Oh, you know what? At first I thought he might be a little crazy or extreme, but he actually makes a lot of sense."
Right.
But he won't do that. And in terms of the reset's irrelevant. The world will dictate his chances, not him. It's too late. He's not going to change. But if there's something that happens in the world that will say, like, we need this guy, then that could happen. And I think he's counting on two things: the world-changing events and him creaming Hillary in the debates, because he's not going to change. The numbers are bad for him right now. He doesn't, you know, he's hoping for a Hail Mary pass, probably in the debates.
I mean, what do you make of that, Kennedy, though? Mayor Giuliani saying he's insensitive because he's a non-politician.
That's true, and that is certainly a double-edged sword for him, because that's the thing that his most ardent supporters love the most about him. It's the fact that it's so rare, and we feel like our problems have been shellacked in this country. And, you know, people aren't making a lot of money. They can't afford to send their kids to a movie, let alone college. And here you have the president saying, you know, the jobs numbers are rosy, the economy is totally picking up, and you know, people don't buy it. So it's nice to hear someone talk in a way that politicians never do. But the problem is he doesn't have command of the subtleties. I mean, he has to be able to be that sharpshooting, free-thinking, straight talker at the appropriate times. But he gets caught up in that addiction to the masses and the crowds and the people who show up at his rallies. And Greg's right; those are not the people that you have to convince right now. And that's where he doesn't have to change. But if he wants to win, he has to make a pretty monumental shift.
See, I don't think he has to change. He has to go back to what he was doing before. I mean, there was a moment when he was more focused around the time of the convention when this was working better, when he focused on ideas like government is totally ineffective and inefficient and wastes your money. I'm going to stop that. You work hard for your money. I'm going to protect it. And that the government is only out there to protect special interests. It's a rigged system. I will change that. That was a good message that resonates with a lot of people that are so frustrated with the idea that they work so hard and then so much money goes to Washington to be wasted and stolen and grafted. If he stuck to that message, that's what he was saying early on. That's what resonated with a lot of people. Instead of getting lost in these cul-de-sacs he wanders off into that have nothing to do with anything.
And that, exactly what you're saying, and pin the economy, pin the bad economy on her.
So this, you are suggesting somewhat of a shift, maybe not a change, but a shift. Is there time?
Well, when you talk with Donald Trump supporters, one thing that they say consistently, at least they're saying to me now, is they do want to make Donald Trump focus again Just like make America.
They want to make Donald great again.
Yeah, they want to make focus again. But only because they are feeling the pains of the economy. They're feeling the things that he had talked about. They're feeling less safe. The polling is showing that, right? People are more fearful in their existence. But I would say that this is inside and outside the tent behavior. If he spent more time inside the tent and they were creating ads and they were spending money on doing certain things.
Spending money for sure.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Whether he writes that check or somebody else does.
Right. That's got to happen.
Then you're going to have less of this need to change when you're on the stump. Because then you can go and be whomever the heck you want to be that got you there. But when you don't spend any time inside the tent cooking those ads and making those things and getting your message out there crisply outside of the stump speeches, this is what you get.
Can I add one quick thing? There's a real lost opportunity. I was very excited when he declared that he was going to run. I thought it was great. Because he was smashing this duopoly that we always talk about of left versus right.
Absolutely.
And I think he has actually succeeded in smashing it for good. Republicans are no longer the same Republicans, and Democrats are no longer the same Democrats. And it has a lot to do with the fact that he floated from one side to the other and back again. Evangelicals are behind a pro-gay marriage candidate. That's kind of a revolution.
Yeah. Right. He gets no credit for that, though, because the party that's inside the tent is now, you know, they don't know. They're apoplectic. They don't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
First on the campaign trail, Vice President Biden will be stumping for Hillary Clinton as the pay-for-play scandal continues to dog her with new revelations and calls for an investigation.
Publicly before, stop trying to fix the police, fix the ghetto. And I talked about those urban pathologies that have to be addressed to shrink the size of the underclass. We have the growth of an underclass here in Milwaukee. You saw some of their behaviors on display last night. So you shrink the size of the underclass. How do you do that? You reduce poverty. You fix the schools. You put people back to work, meaningful work. You hold people accountable for effective parenting.
All right, Sheriff Clark also asking whether it's the outrage over other killings in Milwaukee over the weekend, saying that these riots were not spontaneous and are politically motivated.
I think the public's going to get it. I really do. They're going to be exposed for what this thing really is. It's a thinly veiled anarchist movement, just trying to incite chaos, threatening the institutions we have. The police are a government institution. We stand on the front lines of ordered liberty. You want to attack ordered liberty and have the chaos you saw last night, you have to attack the police to get through it.
All right, so Greg, this is vastly different than some of the protests that we've seen in places like Ferguson and Baltimore and even here in New York City. It almost seems like, you know, there are people in this community who are just waiting for an excuse.
It was based on a false narrative that has been built up over the years where you take different examples of police brutality and non-brutality, you put it together to create the atmosphere for violence. He's absolutely right. This is this riot is predicated not on a justifiable incident, but on an actual criminal being stopped by a police officer. The thing is, you know what the racist response is to this? Is when progressives say that violent behavior is a legitimate response to structural racism. What they're basically saying is that they can't help themselves. This is the only recourse to do this. And to those involved in this, it doesn't really matter what I say or anybody here says. And when I look at Sheriff Clark, it's what he says that matters. And I even hesitate to support Sheriff Clark because I go back to the idea of idea contamination. I want people to listen to him, and if they associate him with me, they go, oh, he's just another Fox News mouthpiece. No, this guy is a moral force. This guy is a moral force for change. He's the most important person that people should be listening to. And the changes that could stop this must come from within the community. And it doesn't come from people like me sitting here pontificating. It comes from the Sheriff Clarks and the sheriffs in Texas.
Well, it also comes from the families and the churches in that community who are today trying to reach out. I mean, we talk about, you know, change from within and change from without.
It can come from them, and it used to back in the 60s, 70s, and maybe part of the 80s. But the conversation, the narrative is no longer coming from them as much. It is important to come from the sheriffs and the leadership and law enforcement, particularly when that leadership is brown, as we saw with the chief down in Dallas, and we're seeing with the sheriff in Wisconsin. Because by having a black police officer now shoot a black suspect. The narrative is changing already. What are you going to hashtag there? Accountability? Because that's what these sheriffs and these lawmakers, or rather these law enforcement officers, are talking about in leadership positions. They're saying, look, is there social engineering that's gone wrong? Look at Baltimore. Yeah. You want to blame somebody, but just about everybody...
Blame Martin O'Malley.
Well, just about everybody
in liberal progressive policies that have failed.
You could, but also those people in those specific positions that could have helped this situation in Baltimore were also brown. It's accountability within the black community. It's like looking at Chicago when you have black-on-black crime. You want to blame it on somebody else, I guess, if you're living there. You don't want to look introspectively, but that's what he's asking you to do.
He so wisely takes it back to economics. I mean, he made the point that Milwaukee was not like that when he was growing up. You know, he said there were jobs, there was a possibility, that liberal policies have created a permanent underclass. Uncle Sam has replaced dad, that it's about being a good dad, about having an intact family where you're encouraging kids to grow up and do something meaningful with their life. But when you feel like you have nothing to lose. And I think, Sandra, that's where a lot of the violence comes from.
And now you just wonder what's going to happen now. The governor has called in the National Guard to back up the police in case this gets worse. And the police union is demanding now that officers go out in twos because they're afraid they won't be able to do their job, and they're worried about their safety.
And we're seeing that across the country as an answer back. Real quickly, I would just ask it this way. If this were Mothers Against Drunk Driving and they were rioting in the streets, would that justify it? I mean, does one thing beget the other? There has to be a different answer besides more violence.
Well, the one... all violence is generally done by young men, and they've lost the role models for conflict resolution. They don't know how to resolve conflict.
All right, let's go to politics for a moment. Now, Vice President Joe Biden is making his debut on the 2016 campaign trail. He is joining Hillary Clinton in Scranton, Pennsylvania today. The event there underway. The appearance comes under the shadow of the Democratic presidential nominee's pay-to-play scandal and new calls for an investigation into whether she granted political favors to Clinton Foundation donors. Here's Republican vice presidential nominee Mike Pence and then Democratic Senator and Clinton supporter Claire McCaskill.
The new emails that have been made public just in the last week seem to make a direct connection between favors done by State Department officials and major foreign donors to the Clinton Foundation. But the American people have a right to know. I think people of this country are tired of the pay-to-play politics in Washington, D.C.
There are no laws that have been broken. There is no evidence there was any pay-to-play. And frankly, this is a distraction for the Trump campaign, which is a dumpster fire at this point.
All this, as a source tells Fox News, some of the FBI's files on the agency's investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private server could be given to a House committee as early as this week, including notes on the agency's interview with former Secretary of State herself. Meantime, Bill Clinton is speaking out about the investigation into his wife's use of a private server. Watch this.
They saw two little notes with a C on it. This is the biggest load of bull I ever heard. That were about telephone calls that she needed to make. And the State Department typically puts a little C on it to discourage people from discussing it in public in the event the Secretary of State, whoever it is, doesn't make a telephone call. Does that sound threatening to the national security to you?
I mean, it's endless when you look at these emails. The most recent thing about Raj Fernando, who is this guy that was put on a high-tech security committee and had no business being on there, ABC asking about it. And they said that the simple truth is this was an internal memo from the Undersecretary of State for Arms Control that Cheryl Mills added him. Raj was not on the list. He was added at their insistence. He was a huge donor.
And imagine
all wanted to be on this special committee. No one on the committee knew why he was there, or who he was, or what the heck he was doing. He was a donor.
Exactly right. And imagine the ripple effect decisions like this can have throughout various branches of government. You know, if you have people like this who are just they're buying
their way
power. Yeah, I mean that's essentially what they're doing. And there's such limited oversight. If the Secretary of State is the one who's deeming that this is all okay, and I think that must have been one heck of a conversation on that plane on the tarmac in Phoenix between Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton, because it seems as though she's completely shielded now from an investigation, that the DOJ has no interest. I shouldn't say that she is shielded. The Clinton Foundation, and this is where some of the most serious allegations are coming from.
That people were looking to track. And also Loretta Lynch has been, look, where is she now? She's been oddly quiet lately, right?
Flying around in that plane.
Yeah, I mean, but the whole thing kind of boils down. I mean, I understand him saying, oh, just 2 notes with the C and blah, blah. I mean, I guess you can make it feel small, but you can't change the facts, right? You can't make the facts small. 33,000 emails deleted. You can't make that 2 little notes on a piece of paper. That doesn't change.
It also, we saw, you know, at the time that everybody was looking into the email scandal and the emails were coming out, her poll numbers dropped. And no matter how much they tried to obfuscate and pretend like it's no big deal, Sandra, people can put together the math of seeing money come in and seeing the Clintons put in their tax returns, you know, making tens of millions of dollars, and then you see them giving access to people in the government. They sold the State Department. Now they could sell the White House.
Yeah, and to hear Bill Clinton reference that as a load of bull that anybody's concerned about at her putting a private email server in her home that's a difficult one, I think, because that hit home with a lot of people. But we were just looking at the live images, but you're going to introduce Vice President Joe Biden when he steps up there. This is the first time that we're going to hear him speaking for her on the campaign trail.
Yeah.
Scranton, Pennsylvania, 75,000 people is the population of that city. White working class male. Yeah. She's going to be targeting her. I can't wait to hear him. I mean, we'll dip in and listen a little bit.
It's interesting. So he was supposed to do this a couple of weeks ago, and there was a terror attack in Europe, and so he delayed. Right. So now he's going to step in. He's going to do this. Scranton, though, is interesting because, remember, she was telling her parents' story at the DNC convention, and we learned so much about her ties to Pennsylvania, specifically Scranton. So now she's going to try to close the loop on, you know, I am every girl just like he is every man. We saw her do this a little bit with Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, you know, on home turf. You know, she understands the economy and I understand. So kind of by osmosis. I don't know. Does it work?
She's going to claim that her grandfather founded Dunder Mifflin.
There we go. I mean, Greg, you want to get in real quick?
But I mean, does this work? I guess that's my question.
Well, I mean, having Joe Biden on the trail with Hillary reminds the Democrats what could have been. Hillary suffers by comparison with every other candidate, with the exception of Trump at his worst. She can her best arsenal weapon, her best weapon is Donald Trump making a mistake. Trump's best weapon is Hillary talking.
All right. Well, on that note, Donald Trump calling out the mainstream media, blasting the New York Times for an article casting him in a very negative light, and even blaming the bad press for his falling poll numbers. So does Trump have a point, or is this just something that comes with the territory of running for office? And right after the show, catch more from the couch. You can join our live chat by clicking the Overtime tab, foxnews.com/overtime. You can also find Overtime live on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/outnumbered.
All right, so we got a little taste of Doug's theory on this earlier in the hour. Now we can delve in deeper. Donald Trump is lashing out at the media, specifically going after the New York Times over a recent article describing him as erratic and sullen. The Times claims Trump's advisors are having a hard time reining him in. Here he is this weekend.
I'm not running against crooked Hillary Clinton. I'm running against the crooked media. That's what I'm running against. Sure. But these are the most dishonest people. The good news is I put down failing at New York Times. The newspaper's going to hell. They've got a couple of reporters in that newspaper who are so bad with, lack of talent. Maybe we'll start thinking about taking their press credentials away from them. You know? Maybe we'll do that. I think so.
Trump also hit back on Twitter, as he often does, blaming the media for his falling poll numbers. He said, if the disgusting and corrupt media covered me honestly and didn't put false meaning into the words I say, I would be beating Hillary by 20%. And Trump's campaign chairperson, along with one of his staunchest supporters inside the Senate, dismissed the New York Times article. Watch.
Contrary to your report and contrary to the New York Times nameless sources story, the campaign is moving move forward and is very strong. We've raised over $132 million in the last 2 months.
You've had this whole morning talking about nothing but negative on the Trump campaign. So this is the kind of thing that does build on itself and is, I think, made mountains out of molehills.
All right, so earlier in this hour, Greg, you were talking about just the inequality in terms of how Republicans and Democrats are covered.
Right.
And you said that that's not breaking news. It's kind of all baked in. Donald Trump should move on. Why?
Yeah, he should, to quote him, he should get over it, because he was the biggest beneficiary of media in the primaries. He got like 4-1 over all of these qualified guys. Governors and senators were just wasted by the fact that he could say something that the press indulged and put out there. So the media isn't causing his problems now. The media isn't telling him what to say. Media bias is a legitimate complaint, but to me, again, he's kind of tarnished it because he brought it on himself. They're just covering him honestly. He's just saying what he's saying.
Are they, though? Are they? He says they're not.
I know.
They say they're not.
Yes.
Yeah, the New York Times editorial, the writer said it's almost impossible not to color objective journalism when you have such disdain for a candidate.
But one of the points is that he's not the first Republican to face this, and others have won in spite of it. And the only thing that he can do is go past the media and speak directly to the people.
But
and he was able to do that for, well, that's the other
That's exactly what people said when he made the shift from when it was obvious that he was going to get the nomination, and he made the shift from the primary to the general. That's when a lot of people stood up and said, you have to start earning money now. You have to use that Republican infrastructure because the media is going to turn. They will no longer be your friend, and those of whom in the media who are friendly with Hillary Clinton wanted him to be the candidate.
It was never about friendship. I mean, when you saw wall to wall on some of the other, networks, alphabet soup networks that have the different letters that don't spell anything, it was about ratings. I mean, it was never about liking him. This was not like, oh, he's such an affable guy.
No, but it was about choosing him to face her because they thought that he was.
That was also going to kind of fade away because you have, you have this thing called equal time outside of cable, and so some of those networks were going to bend to that too. But isn't this also just about the fact that he hasn't spent money with focused negative? I mean, here in New York, where Hillary Clinton was a senator for years, there are ads running against Donald Trump because he's from New York. I mean, Democrats are concerned. If they're concerned in buying money in New York, shouldn't that tell him that he should spend some money on ads?
Absolutely needs the backup of the ads. I mean, especially if you want to send something out where you're exactly on message that is totally controlled. There are also a million things that Hillary Clinton has done. I would have cut that clip of her with the Orlando shooter's father behind her head as it made that an ad and played it over and over again. I mean, there are so many things. It's such an easy target, and they're not doing it. They've got to spend some money. He should start by
why isn't he spending it? That's the $1 million, billion question.
Yeah, well, if you're talking money,
so why
isn't he spending it?
No, he says that's his way out.
Yeah.
That's
why isn't he spending it?
Look, his camp says there's still so much time. I mean, I heard Pence earlier say twice it's still so early. And meanwhile, every Republican strategist and every surrogate's out there saying, well, we got to do something now. I don't know. Donald Trump versus the media, I think he originally thought that this earned him sympathy, and I think it did.
Yeah.
But everybody you talk to now that's in his camp says, stop, stop. It's a tired message. Focus on, as you keep pointing out, Melissa, go back to the economy. Tell us how you're going to make America great. Go back and focus.
I wish that were a tired message, that there were so many jobs being created that we'd say, oh, really, the economy? But it's not.
Yeah. No, you know what, though? If there's so much time left, then just focus that time, that energy, and that money and go after the independents. I mean, that's what you have to do. If you're going to make a shift, that's where you make the shift.
History being taken down at a state university. Why is
A pair of 80-year-old paintings are being moved after causing controversy at the University of Wisconsin Stout. The paintings, which show interactions between white settlers and Native Americans, have been hanging in a university hall for decades. But the school's diversity leadership team recently complained the works were offensive to Native Americans and could have potentially harmful effects. First, the school responded by saying it would put them in storage. But now they'll be moved to a different room, but people can see them by appointment only under so-called controlled substances. Greg.
Circumstances. Controlled circumstances.
That is amazing.
Oh my God. Sorry. Controlled substances would be awesome.
That is amazing.
Holy Freudian slip over there, Sandra.
That was a good one.
It is as though they're like entering some kind of strange torture chamber. Yeah. Oh my goodness, I can't stare at this painting. What a bunch of babies. This is what we are creating. Right. And it goes back to what I said earlier about conflict resolution. We can't even have discussions anymore. Diversity now is code for intolerance. If we want to be diverse, we can't have actual different opinions. We have to just remove it, put it in a playpen, Put it in a playpen and let everybody look at it. It's like, it's insane.
Could you imagine, though,
how could they handle truth?
Having an honest discussion about race in a college classroom. Now, I mean, I don't think that actually happens for fear that...
Well, that's why it's not happening outside the classroom.
Should they never go to the Holocaust Museum?
Anywhere. No one wants to have an honest conversation about race.
I mean, there are two things going on here. One is, political correctness on college campuses running totally amok and destroying the brains of an entire generation of otherwise worthwhile Americans. But you also have, like, art. You know, it's like art is supposed to challenge people. Sometimes it's representative.
Take that down?
No, but the point is, close down the Holocaust Museum, close down the 9/11 museums, because those, if you can't handle a painting,
close down the Whitney.
Yeah, you can't handle anything.
But I mean, if you can't handle, if your religion is not Catholicism, and you go to see, are they going to start covering the paintings for visitors?
What does harmful mean? What is harmful?
So bizarre.
If this actually happened, I mean, they're showing a point in time when things were happening. They're trying to historically represent what was going on. Yeah. Like, you're just going to wipe that away? I mean, maybe I'm offended by Norman Rockwell paintings where they show the mom, at home with
puppies around the poker table.
Does that mean that I'm being subjugated and supposed to stay home?
Next, they're going to want a list of anybody who asks for an appointment to go view these paintings.
Yes.
Because...
Whoa, that's actually really scary.
But sometimes I think they do these things just to get riled up.
Do you remember the old lady who tried to alter the fresco in Italy?
Yes.
And she ended up making, this beautiful icon of Christ into like a woolly bear, and she was horrified and became incredibly depressed. But it boosted tourism, rather. Pardon the slip.
Wow, see, something's going on.
It boosted tourism in the town, and I'm wondering if the same thing might happen at the UW Stout.
We're going to have so many safe spaces, nobody's going to be able to congregate for class.
Meanwhile, offensive, or like, not offensive, performance art.
Everybody's going to be in their safe space.
Performance art that is absolutely disgusting, that involves bodily fluids and everything. That's okay, because that's art.
That's protected.
That's protected.
Was that your Friday night?
Yes. Now look at Karen Finley and all that stuff.
All right, more of this in just a moment.
Greg Gutfeld, he's one of a kind.
Well, thank you.
And it was really him today, not a hologram.
Yes.
He often threatens other shows. He will just show up in
I'm a golden gram.
Form. You're a golden.
Crunchy and sweet.
Oh,
yes.
I remember those from back in the day. Do they still make you
more of a hippie, Gutfeld?
Yes. Oh, no, I'm an over hippie. Yeah, a lot of patchouli on my cereal.
Thanks a lot for being here.
Thanks, Greg.
We're going to go overtime on the web, foxnews.com/outnumbered. Click on the overtime tab. Also, Facebook Live, Outnumbered FNC. We'll see you tomorrow at noon Eastern. Happening now.
Happening now.